Okay, today doing a video on a Blackcat JB-76M, or they call it the JB-200. Don't know why the Blackcat changed the name from the 200 to the 76. Maybe 76 sounded better, or came out in 76, I don't know, but it used to call it the JB-200. The two-piece Blackcats, the base version or the mobile version, come with the head unit or the RF unit like this. On the base it only has one switch on it for standby operate, and on the base unit it has a different power supply. Do I have one laying around here? Yeah, here go one over here. No, that's not a factory one though, but the base unit here, the power switch is right here for it. This is a bias adjustment that I added to that one, so I can play with the bias on that one there. But anyway, this is JB-200 or JB-76M mobile version, and that's the mobile power supply, and it does not have the power switch. The mobile head unit only is the only one that has a power switch. Both versions, the base, the mobile, the M, the 200, they all have two octal type power tubes. 8417, which these are, I don't know if you can see that, are probably best. Some came with 7581s. Those are high voltage or high powered versions of the 6L6 family of tubes, is what a Tram D201 uses for the audio tube and the final. This is just a kind of the same tube, but it'll take more voltage, and it can put out a little bit more power. You can push it a little harder than the 6L6. You put a 6L6 in these, it'll work, but won't last long with all the voltage and everything going on in it. I'm going to go through these amps. This is what I changed in it. The electrolytic capacitors, these were actually the bleeders. Blackcat does use bleeders in their amps, and I just put some new ones in there. And another common thing that goes in these old amps, all of them, is the relay. This actually is the relay that turns on the high voltage. When you key down, when the relay kicked in, I'm going to turn this power supply over. That relay turns on the main transformer, which runs the high voltage over here in the power supply. And see if I can turn it around here. And I changed it to this heavy duty car relay right here, because that relay, the coil was bad, it was open. But old relays are common problems. This here is the original RF relay, and I cleaned that up real good, so that's working good. And put the caps in. Mobile amps, because of the way they switch the voltage, the hertz or the frequency is a lot faster, so they can be a lot smaller, because how can I say this? Because of the frequency, they recover a lot quicker. So in mobile amps, you'll see transformers a little bit smaller than they are in the base version of the same amp. So this is pretty much the power supply. Those there are the switching transistors, and with mobile amps that run tubes, just about all of them have these switching arrangements with these switching transistors, and they chop up the DC and they feed it to the transformer there, and that's how they create, you know, AC out of DC. So you hear a buzz when you key them down. I have a lot of questions on how to fix Blackcats or what's going on with them. They're a little bit more complicated than a regular, what I call grounded grid amp, because they're tetrodes. So you need powers on the screen grid, and this is just a schematic of a JB-76. You know, that's the main tube, and it uses two of them, but Basically, to run a JB-76 or a Blackcat amp with this tube in it, it's going to be about 800 volts on the plate, you know, when the tube is keyed up. In the mobile version, it's only going to be 800 volts when you key down. On the base version, it's 800 volts on the plate at all times. Pin 4 there is the screen grid. When you're keyed up, you're going to need about 400, about half the plate is what that runs on, give or take. Doesn't have to be exact. Some, you know, there are 30 or 40 versions of these things, so some they lower it a little bit more, some it's a little bit higher. But it's going to be need about 400 volts, give or take, on the screen when it's transmitting. Now, pin 5 over here, that's grid 1, and this is grid driven, not grounded grid like a triode is. And that's the input coil, the tuner in the back right there. So your input, you know, from the radio comes in here, goes through this input transformer input coil, and then the other side of the input goes to pin 5. So that's your RF coming in, but also coming in, if you see that negative 64, that's the negative bias. There's a lot of problems with bias on these amps, and people don't know, you know, what the bias should be or what it does. And there are many different versions of the bias is one of the problems. Minus 64, that's a lot of bias, so that would cut the voltage off completely. Oh, my wife coughing in there. Minus 64 would cut the amp off, or put it into standby mode basically at minus 64. So if the bias is, you know, stuck at 64 when you're keyed down, you're going to get no or very little output, you know, on the amp. And that's a common problem with the amps, is that the bias is messed up. So it may be at 64, give or take, all the time, and hence it's not it's in cutoff mode or standby mode for the basically. When you key down, that minus 64 should be about 32, give or take. You know, some use 36, 38. You know, I've seen as low as 24, 25. Like I say, there's so many different versions. But when you key down, that needs to drop to around 32 volts. But then there are some versions where it's 32 volts of bias all the time, and they cut the 400 volts on the screen here, you know, going through the relay. They cut that on and off. So in standby, it'll be 0 there, which means the tube is not running and not conducting. And when you key down, it'll be 400 or so, give or take, in some versions. And again, in some versions, it's going to change the bias from 64 or give or take in standby to about 32. And there are many, many different ways that they do the bias. This is the bias circuit they have here in this one. And this one, they just have one zener and a resistor here. But there are many, many different ways of doing the bias. But anyway, long as you could get around 32 in your transmit, and you should be good. Another thing though, if you lose the bias, you have no bias at all, the tube is gonna, the amp is gonna be drawing current and power like crazy, because the bias is what, you know, cuts it off or calms it down. So a lot of times, you know, a resistor will go, or a diode will open, you know, in the bias, so it has no bias, you know, so no volts over here, you know, going over to grid 5. And the amp is like drawing power like crazy, you know, like you turn it on and it's overheating, and you run some power in it, and, you know, it's dead keying, you know, instead of the 40 or less it's supposed to, it's dead keying like, you know, 150, 200 watts. And you're like, it's running so hot and all that. It's like, why? And again, because you've lost your bias. So that's basically, you know, how this amp works. You need 800 on the plate when keyed down, 400 on the screen, and about minus 30 on pin 5 on the bias. So anyway, I guess that's enough of a tutorial on that. Another thing about this amp, it doesn't have a variable tune capacitor. It's got fixed. And if I can zoom in there, if you see those purple colored cap that has CMO is upside down, right there under the coil, it's 2 of them. in series, and those are actually the tune caps. They're just fixed, non-adjustable. Then that's your plate tank coil, and then it's got a small trimmer for the load, and that's how you do the load, is you turn this trimmer over here on that side. So it does have a tune and a load, except the tune is not adjustable. You only can adjust the load in this amp. Anyway, we should be warmed up now. It's on standby now. 200 watt scale over here going into a dummy load. Mud duct radio going in standby. 200 watts. I'm dead keying about 3. Listening about 8. Talking about 6. And that's all I'm going to be putting into the amp. And turn it on. And let's see what we get. Right now I'm dead keying about 7. You know, from the 3. And as you can see, you know, it's swinging a lot more. And that's on average. And I got it back down there. And you got the variable in the back that adjusts the input, which you are supposed to use to adjust the dead key in this amp. You can dead key it at 40 or less. So I'm going to dial the dead key up. There you go. Just under 40 right there. And keying it down. Hello, hello. Audio, I'm talking about 70 on average again. Listen, about 140, 150, and then on peak. Audio. And these amps are designed to do 200 peak. I'm going to go to the 2000 watt scale on peak. Audio. And you hear that buzzing, that's the DC being chopped up by those transistors I said earlier. That's basically how Blackcat works. These old set the line, it was trying to be mud duct proof. You don't want to set the dead key over that line. You know, if you turn the dead key way up, you know, using that variable in the back, it'll do more. But it's not designed to do that. These amps are designed to dead key low and swing high, like this one's doing now. Dead keying about 40 and on peak. Audio, I'm talking about 230, something like that. Nice little modulator amp. Little Blackcat JB-200 Mobile 28417 6L6 family of tubes. That's it for this one. All right. Bye.